It is not an option, but a responsibility to speak out, all of us together to demand change. Hi, this is Maliha Bas, and I welcome you all to the online series of National Dialogue on Climate Change. As we have discussed a lot about climate and water governance in our previous sessions, so today we'll be discussing about future of water and climate governance globally and nationally. So for that purpose, we have with us Ma'am Annisa Triyanti. As far as her achievements are concerned, she's a postdoctoral researcher on climate change and water governance, and she's also appointed as global youth representative to the Global Science and Technology Advisory Group, and she's also a reviewer of an international journal which is related to disaster risk management. So, how are you, Annisa Triyanti?
I'm great. I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. So, Annisa, tell us something about climate and climate governance. How they are so important? Why they're so important?
Yes, I think I could just share with you my slides. Then I can
Sure.
explain a little bit more about the background and also the importance of climate and water governance. One second. All right. Hopefully you can see my slide now. Okay. So yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. So currently I'm working as a postdoctoral researcher, and I'm also researching the issue of water and climate governance, and also focusing more on the coastal and delta area. To explain a little bit of the background, why climate change and water governance is important. We know that the climatic condition itself is not a problem, but the problem is actually lay on the more anthropogenic aspect of the problems. What we see now in the world, there is an increasing population growth and also urbanization. There's a massive industrialization happening, especially in the developing countries. And also this leads to very huge land use conversions from maybe open space, green spaces to factory or settlements. And of course, this increasing activities, human activities cause exploitation of natural resources, things that we need to fulfill our life and also our basic needs. One of those is the groundwater. And in many of coastal cities and delta cities, there's increasing over-exploitation of groundwater that leads to land subsidence and also massive degradation of environment, declining quality of ecosystem. Like what happened for the past 3 months, the COVID-19 crisis that happening around the world, I think people start to see the connection of the great degradation of ecosystem with this very big health crisis. Once we as humans try to interrupt environment life, wildlife, then this virus spreading among us, and it actually opened the eyes of many people how much of our action actually lead to this type of crisis that we never thought before. And of course, not only COVID-19 crisis, but we also expect to see much more risk in the future that combines environmental, health, also disaster that link to the climate change. And of course, this will affect mostly the vulnerable people. And this lead to very big problem of social injustice, because the marginalized community, vulnerable communities are the ones that have less access to resources to cope with this type of disaster and also climate change impacts. And all of these anthropogenic problems is, of course, drives and also worsen the natural aspect of the climatic variabilities. We see the sea level rising and also threatening a lot of coastal cities and also deltas around the world, and also erosion. And I also mentioned already the land subsidence phenomenon. and higher exposure to water-related hazards such as storms and floods. And this, of course, will affect a lot of people who are currently residing, especially in the coastal area and also the small island states. Well, climate change itself, if we see from the type of the problems, we could define it as a wicked problems par excellence. So this is a terminology that is coined by Whittle and Weber in 1973. So there are different characteristics of wicked problems, which is, I think, the three of the characteristic I show you here is very relevant to climate change problem. The first one is that the problems related to climate changes are mostly induced by an anthropogenic process. I already explained to you in the previous slide. So there is a challenge in actually understanding the root cause of the problem, because the problems are so complex that it actually have so many layers that it's difficult to understand the root causes of problems. The second characteristic would be that this combination of this natural and anthropogenic process has no stopping rule. So we do not know how much adaptation or effort is enough. There's a very high uncertainty of the future of what will happen with the sea level rise, with our global temperature. Then it brings a big problem on managing this problem, because we don't know exactly what will happen in the future. To deal with this type of wicked problems, there are no ultimate solutions. And due to different layers and the complexity of the problems, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. That's why governance is very important here, because governance itself serves as a steering mechanism to reach collective goals. In this context, we talk about the climate change, and then our goals would be to prevent, to mitigate, to adapt to climate change, and also prevent the happening of disaster and another associated risk. So the first step here is to understand how to govern adaptation and also transformation. I think in the case of adaptation, it's quite clear that we wanted to adapt to climate change impacts and also associated risk. But the issue of transformation is very relevant, especially now. It opens our eyes to see what should we change radically or incrementally in the future. And that will actually need a lot of different approach and change in the system, in the way we interact, in the way our institutional are structured, and also the way that governments are operating in different countries, for example, and the way that we formulate the policy measures to adapt and also to transform. And then, of course, the biggest problem is to change a systemic institutions, because these are the systems that are already exist since a long time ago. It became our culture, and it became our identity, even though a lot of practices are not sustainable. And also there's a challenge to be able to have a room for maneuver, especially to adapt to future uncertainties like climate change. So we have to embed flexibility and also anticipation to respond to these climate change problems. And the intermediate goal, I would say, is to change our society and also to transform it. So change the behavior of life, way of life, to be more sustainable, to be more aware that all of our action actually will determine what will happen in the future in terms of climate change impact. So I think this is my last slide. I think this presentation meant to be just to trigger a discussion later on. So what are actually the conditions, and what do we need normatively to govern the future of water and climate issues? The first one is an integrated approach, because climate and water issues are not working in silos. And as I mentioned in my initial slide about the complexity and uncertainty, the very dynamic layers of the root cause of the problem, that means that we need to find an integrated approach, combining different perspectives and different actors as well. That leads to the second point about the strong collaboration and partnership. We know that the government, the new, like a modern governance, allows more actors to be involved. That includes private sectors, NGO, local community, every aspect of the society work together with the government authorities to actually partnering and find a solution together. But this will lead to a problem of too many voices. So how can we deal with that? Then we need a strong coordination and effective regulation. This coordination will enable a clear mechanism on how we interact, what are the goals, and what we should do to make sure that all of our actions are sustainable. And the fourth point would be that we need a legitimate process. Here comes the importance of involving people that are on the front line. That includes the local community, marginalized people, because they are the ones who are affected the most from this climate crisis. And lastly, I think the best combination of governing future is to have a programmatic approach, meaning that we have to combine short, medium, and long-term strategies. So every time we try to formulate a short strategies, we have to also think about what will happen in the next 10, 20 years. And it means we need a good projection and also good visioning about what happened in the future. And to deal with uncertainty, which is like a very important dimension of future, we need awareness that this, for example, just easy example, COVID-19, we don't know what will happen in 10 years. If this type of virus gonna emerge again, or is it gonna be even bigger scale than this time? So we have to aware that things gonna change. And of course, we hope for the best, but we also have to prepare for the worst. We need to accept that as a way of life, and then, well, do more action to gain more knowledge and understand the foreseen and also anticipate the unforeseen risks, things that we cannot see right now, to be more flexible and also to be more prepared. And again, any type of solution in terms of climate change adaptation has to be contextualized based on the local conditions. So the norm of appropriateness is very important here. You can transfer a very sophisticated technology from the West to the South, but when it doesn't work because of the local and cultural condition, then it will not be effective. So this notion of appropriateness have to be put on the front line. Yeah, so I put here a type of diagram that show us the difference between known knowns, unknown knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. It's quite complicated when I read it, but this is just to show you that there are different layers of uncertainties. We are now is actually we are here, and we are here. So of course we don't know what will happen in the future, but what we can do is to invest our resources to trace back what happened in the past and trying to project and trying to understand more about what will happen in the future if we stay in the trajectory. I think the IPCC exactly are doing this type of thing, but I do feel like this should be the basis of governing climate change and water issues in the future. And although this concept is really quite widely known, especially in the project management, I don't think that our governments or governments in many countries are actually already aware about this, how to actually push more investment, trying to understand what happened in the past, and to project what will happen in the future in order to anticipate the unforeseen risk. Okay, that's my last slide. I will stop sharing
Okay.
now. Go. I will give
Okay.
the floor back to you, Malia.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay, Anissa, what I have understood from your slides related to the climate governance is that climate governance can be divided into two parts. First is realizing, yes, it is uncertain and a complex phenomenon. And the second part is, yes, we need to anticipate that what we could do in future. We need to, start working on the adaptation measures to, run a smooth governance related to the climate change, right?
Yes, that is correct. So the uncertainty and the complexity of the problem should be the
Hmm.
priority first to understand the exact problem that we want to deal with.
Okay, Anissa, my question is that what are the negative impacts of weak climate governance?
Well,
Suppose there is no climate governance, what could be the repercussions of it?
well, governance itself is a human activity. So things that we do to actually deal with problems, like I mentioned in my slide before, is a type of steering mechanism to identify how we interact with each other, how we frame the problem, understanding steps to be taken to deal with this type of problem, and also to develop a policy or regulation. So I think if there's no governance, then I don't think we are all here, because governance actually, when you think about it in an informal way, happens in every part of our life. But what we're talking here is actually a governance that could lead to the societal transformation, which means that the scale is higher, and the stakes are also higher in terms of climate change impacts and how it affects our communities in the future. It will be very devastating if we have a weak governance. I think that's the
Hmm.
reason why many of the I think UN agencies now trying to push forward for a stronger governance, because that's a key aspect that could lead to change for the better.
Okay, what are the environment friendly activities that government of developing countries or underdevelopment countries could adopt?
Well, there are a lot of concepts out there, but one that particularly my interest is a concept called ecosystem-based approach or nature-based
Okay.
solutions. Well, it's kind of gaining more and more interest lately, but I don't think this is actually something new, especially from developing countries, because we have a lot of like very rich ecosystem. We acknowledge that they give us services that could help us to adapt to climate change, to reduce disasters, as well as to support our livelihood, the livelihood of the community. So this is entirely not a new concept, but I think it's good that there's so much more advocacy going on in this type of ecosystem-based approach and nature-based solution, because it shows that now the understanding of climate change is wider than just the effect to human, but also the effect to environment, and the combination and interaction between environment and human life. So I think this is a very potential approach for many of developing countries, but of course the challenges would be how to implement this, how to make such a good framework which will enable this type of approach to be mainstream in the national policy.
So, ma'am, what about Netherlands? Have they adopted any such policy?
Well, for the Netherlands, initially, because they are very having a high risk of sinking, because they are very low above, under the sea level. And they had a very massive disaster in 1953, and really opens their eyes that they need a concrete protection. So I think the main
Okay.
protection until now is still a hard engineering, which is like seawall, sea gate, um, yeah, dikes. I mean, it's like
Okay.
a part of Dutch culture. But this type of approach, this nature-based solution, also exists here. I think in a smaller scale, and I think the role is more to support the hard engineering part, and also to make sure that there's still a balance. And I think it's quite also successful especially in the town where I live now in Nijmegen. We are living very close to a river called Waal. And yeah, they opened a space for the river. It's called the project called I think Room for the River, but the condition is that they open space for nature to grow. So it's also part of the nature-based solution. But this is exactly like what we're doing in Indonesia, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, but we don't frame it that way because it's a part of our life. But nowadays, because of a lot of expansion, urbanization, industrialization, I think it's also important to push this concept further to make sure that we have a good balance between
Okay,
environment and human
Anissa,
activities.
exactly. Apart from hardcore engineering, what we as civilians could do to fight climate change in our area?
Yes, I think, well, in relation to governance, the local community has a lot of power to self-govern. We call it in governance scholars, we call it self-governance. So self-governance, easy example, in my hometown or in Indonesia, I do research about mangroves, and they believe that mangroves could actually, and which it is, they protect a community living behind it and also reduce the exposure of the wave. And they build some kind of mangrove groups, local mangrove community that helps to conserve, um, give training to young people also about the importance of mangroves. This is type of self-governance, and it's very important to develop social capital. And social capital is very important to make sure that all of the initiatives at the local level would be successful. So yeah, civilian is of course local community should be at the heart of any type of initiatives because they are there, and they're the one who's supposed to conserve and also to make sure that it's any type of initiatives are sustainable.
Okay. Anissa, how do you see the future of water governance and climate change in
Well, the
areas, especially
future.
in developing and underdeveloping countries? And please quote some examples from your country also.
Yes, I think it goes to a right direction. Also, thanks to COVID-19. Now that
Mhm.
people are more aware about, well, thanks to it's also a bad thing, but it's so sad that we have to get this type of crisis to open our eyes that we need a stronger action to prevent and mitigate climate change and also to conserve our environment. But nowadays, I think governmental authorities in developing countries are more and more aware about the importance of governance and the importance of partnership and collaborations. I mean, many of developing countries are actually very dependent on international grant, for example, right,
Mhm.
to implement their big initiatives on climate change and such. I think we can see it in a good way and a bad way. In a good way is that there are a lot of partnership and collaboration, transfer and knowledge. But on the other side, there's also we also don't want developing countries to be dependent on international donors. But I think the process will go slowly, but going to the right direction to first increase awareness about this type of importance of partnership and collaboration, importance of interaction between sectors, because that also, I think, most of the weakness of developing countries, we have a lot of uh, bureaucracy, very complicated
Mhm.
bureaucracy, each other doing different things, but also same things without knowing that they are doing the same thing. So in that sense, coordination become very important issues here. But I would see that the awareness is good now, but the problem is of course how to make sure that this gonna last and also be like a stronger commitment as well of developing countries in the future.
Okay, Nisa, as you talked about participation of civilians, so how do you see the future of young climate scientists in the field of water and climate governance?
They have a very massive role, I would say, for youth. Well, in my research place, well, I did my PhD research in mangrove place in northern part of Java coast and also in Tamil Nadu area in India. And in both locations, youth are a central initiators. They are the one who mobilize resources. They bridge communication between local communities and local leaders and government. So they're really actively pushing towards more concrete action. And they are on the front line doing a lot of different initiatives, either by themselves with youth organization or collaborating with other agencies, because youth is not only how do you call it, a dimension of age, but they also work in different sectors. And you mentioned about young scientists. Well, I can only say about young scientists because I'm doing research and that's my passion. I think what we are doing now is really trying to understand what we can do in the future. Gather so much, as many as we can about the knowledge of climate change. What do we know now? What we don't know, and what we should investigate further in the future. We also interact with each other. I mean, with this example of NDCC, I think it really shows as one of the good practices of sharing knowledge, and inspire each other, and to make sure that we have a peer support, to support our research or whatever that you are doing in your professional life. But um, I think we have a bright future in our generation. But of course, we have to make sure that we have a good support as well from the current generation, and collaborate, do more intergenerational collaboration. That's the only way we learn from our seniors from the past, and that's the only way to learn what will maybe happen in the future.
Okay, Anisa, we have hundreds of questions for you in our comment section. So let's
Oh, very
have a
exciting.
yeah, let's have a look at them. Okay. There's a guy, Jesse Ramcharan. He's saying hello. And okay, there's a question by Sayyida Fatma Zara. She's saying, are there any strict law enforcement by the government for reducing air pollution? Because it's,
Well, yes, go
yeah,
ahead, Malia.
yeah, continue, Anisa.
Okay, well, this is a very broad question, and every government have different policies. For Indonesia, I think they have a quite strict law enforcement, but then the problem is the implementation itself. And it leads to many of other different aspects, such as if you talk about air pollution, that it means one of the biggest source of air pollution is in industry, right? And there's a
Hmm.
weakness, I think, in terms of regulating industries, especially in environmentally vulnerable area, for example. So I couldn't actually really answer your question in a
Because
more,
it has a very
yeah,
broad dimension. Okay, let's move to
yeah,
another question.
exactly.
Yeah, it's a question by Alina Rizwan Hashmi. She's saying that climate crisis is the water crisis because she has quoted, this phrase from a recent article, and she's saying that, do you agree that how does the interconnection go? Like, is
Yeah,
climate crisis is the water crisis only?
of course. Of course, not only, but
Okay.
water is the important element of climatic variability, right? And
Hmm.
what water cycle, for example, it actually manifests a lot in the climate change, and it's important then how to understand the connection. Uh, well, if you talk about the impact, for example, the sea level rise, erosion, water related disaster,
Okay.
the degrading quality of water, and the lack of distribution and drought is all affected by the climate change itself. So I think there's a lot of different layers of connection, but I would agree with you that the climate crisis is a water crisis, but it's not only water crisis. Can be social justice crisis because it affects a lot of marginalized people. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we have a very interesting question by Ahmed Gondal. He's saying, please discuss few smart governance initiatives to make development and climate compatible.
Smart governance initiative. Well, depends how you define smart, but nowadays smart is defined as highly technological governance. using a lot of fancy stuff like Internet of Things, for example. That could be one of the example. Or using like experimentation platform of governance where they sit together and also discuss about the problem. But this is mainly introduced by Western countries because I think in developing countries there's a lot of culture hierarchical issues where you cannot sit together with a lot of different people from different sectors and from different hierarchy, let's say. So that could be an option to have this type of experimentation, either with more technological experimentation or societal transformation. Yeah, technological,
Yeah.
technological and social societal experimentation. Because I think what's most important if it's the measure is acceptable on the local level or not.
Okay, so Dam Sheikh is asking about the role of deforestation in climate change.
Yeah, so well, it's all about the carbon cycle. I mean, the forests, of course, help us to reduce the emission, but then there's also recent article said that planting only forests everywhere will not help because we can also see a lot of different portion of human activities like industrialization and also the way that our transportation system are very heavily dependent on this carbon society, let's say. So
Okay.
I don't think
Ikra,
it's yeah. Sorry.
no, no, continue. Please continue. I thought you're finished.
No. So yeah. I think it's forest is definitely one type of solution, and we have to conserve forest to make sure that we could adapt more to climate change and mitigate climate change.
Okay, Bukhari is asking about the climate diplomacy. Is there
Mm.
anything like climate diplomacy?
Yes, of course. I mean, what is happening now in yeah, even in IPCC, which is like a scientist platform to gather evidence, there is also diplomacy, but also in the space such as the Paris Agreement, which is now driving the whole climate action in a global level. It is full of diplomacy. Every country
Mhm.
trying to put their interests forward, and of course don't want to lose their interests over the other countries. That is climate diplomacy. But I think what is important to raise here is that youth and young scientists should also be part of climate diplomacy. And what happened now with Greta Thunberg initiative, the Friday for the Future initiative, that is climate diplomacy.
Okay, Maria Angelica, she has asked a very interesting question. She's saying,
Yes.
what can we do as a citizens to stop climate change when the governments are interested in increasing their economy only?
Yes, this is actually a very highly debated issue
Mm,
because many of the people, I also believe that climate change is a systemic issue. But in reality, we also have part or have a say on that. There is a different dichotomy between let the system change or let us
mm,
change. I think in the case where there's a lot of less optimistic scenario, that we should go back to ourselves and see what we can do better in terms of sustainability and climate change adaptation without actually forgetting about this responsibility of the system itself, like global markets, our government actions, etc. I hope that answered the question. Like I try to be
yeah, yeah,
short.
yeah. That's really good. Aksa Noor, she's asking, establishing effective legal and institutional framework is crucial to climate change management. So, what strategies have Pakistan adopted in this regard? I would not ask you anything about Pakistan. Tell me something about the Netherlands or Indonesia.
Well, I think for the Netherlands, it really focuses on trying to decarbonize society. But this is also a heated debate because there's also still a lot of dependence on oil company, etc. And we also, I think, the Netherlands, trying to be more ecological and environmentally friendly in terms of the energy management. So more experimentation, more technology on clean energy. And in terms of research, there is like bunch of research trying to um, get an innovation in terms of decarbonizing society. I think that's the only thing that I can say from the Netherlands side.
Okay. Anissa, is there anything like ecofeminism? Because Ashwin Makhija has asked you about it. Ecofeminism. What do you mean by ecofeminism? What does it mean?
Well, well, I know feminism, but I'm not particularly familiar with the concept of ecofeminism. So I don't think I'm the right person to answer this question. But I
Sure,
would
sure, sure.
definitely try to investigate as well. This is very interesting.
Okay. So, how are government's projects considering climate change education? Like, is there anything like delivering climate change education to the masses by the government? Because since it's a part of, it should be a part of the climate governance.
Yes, I mean, I could only tell from the Indonesian side. Now I think it's part of the curriculum,
Okay.
one way or another. I know that Italy has really put it like climate change as a curriculum, but Indonesia in a more indirect way. And there's more high education institution now opening programs on related to climate change and disaster risk reduction. But I think it can be more radical. But I don't know when they would do that. But I think it's a good first step. But Italy definitely is the best example as for now.
Okay, Anisa, there are still hundreds of questions that are needed to be answered. So we'll invite you in another session. And
Yeah, sure. We'll be happy to.
yeah, sure. So thank you so much for your time, Anisa, and it's really nice to have you here. So could do you want to say something about the NDCC and what's your experience, and um, do you want to add something? Do you want to give some advice to the team of NDCC,
I think you guys are
that is National
amazing.
Dialogue on Climate Change?
Yes, I think you are really amazing. I mean, I just got to know you after your invitation, but then when I see your platform, see the way you interact with a lot of experts, and see how you manage this type of dialogue is really amazing. And this is a really good steps toward influencing our next generation to inspire them to get more knowledge and to be more proactive in the issues of climate change. And I do hope that you also collaborate with your government because they should know this initiative and they should support and they should also promote and see how this also can be implemented in other countries maybe. This is a very good idea.
Okay.
So congratulations to all of you.
Thank you so much, Anisa, and thank you for your time. And inshallah, we'll invite you soon in our next
Okay.
session in our upcoming talk. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye all. Assalamualaikum.